Hello, and a very warm welcome to all of our listeners of this very special episode of the GESTALTEN podcast. My name is Martin Groschwald, and I am here with my very dear colleague, Eric Gallina. Eric, welcome and hello.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much, and welcome to you as well. I apologize off the outset because I'm feeling a bit under the weather, so we're going to have to take this one easy, but it is a very special one, so looking forward.
Yes, and for everyone, this will be not a special episode where we will, have a guest on the show. This will actually be one of our favorite episodes that we're recording this year. We've done this last year already, so this will be the Konzepthaus Design Awards for everything that pretty much comes into the year of 2019. We are having 9 categories in total that we're going through, one after another. And Eric and myself will reveal our choices for certain categories. So we're going to have production car design of the year, concept car design of the year, but also things such as most disappointing production car design, best exterior, and so on and so on. So we will be talking about this for the next, about hour or so. And Eric, what do you think? Let's get cracking, right?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Now, first category going out to the best color material finish, color and trim design, whichever you prefer, of the year. And this will be an open category, so it won't be specific for production or concept car. We took the freedom to actually choose either. So this will be just in general the best CMF design of 2019. And Eric, we'll do it that way. You begin, and then I will share my thoughts about everything from my side. So your CMF design of the year for either concept car or production car, please share it with us.
All right. So I basically picked the BMW i Vision i Next, that concept car that was unveiled sometime over the summer. And then it made subsequently its public debut at the Frankfurt Auto Show. It paid homage to a certain, M car design back in the day from Giugiaro, of course. That's there was, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't very much in tune, in my opinion, with the BMW whole form language and things. But again, it's a future vision car, so that's BMW's forward concepts. But to me, that car was just a pure color and trim job. There was nothing really, exciting about that car if you took away the colorways, and that was it. I mean, from a material perspective, they used leather and things like that. It was cool with like the way that the IP with the gauges was kind of laid out. It's like perspex. So I think for me, that was kind of a shouty, orange and silver car that looked like one of these baboons that I forget the name of. But we've mentioned this car already in another podcast, so avid listeners can go back and remember and check that one out. But so that to me was, I guess, from a CMF team, BMW's done always pretty well. And it's a luxury brand, so why not? But that to me, I guess, was standing out in terms of CMF.
Cool. My choice will be going to the Kia Habanero, not just because of its name, because that is just one of the best names that a car has received this year. But after I saw, was presented at the New York Motor Show, and I saw it in person at the LA Motor Show for the very first time. And I remember when we did the podcast episode on the New York Motor Show, we were both, raving about this. We love the color and trim, the way it works together. It's a small car, but it's very modern. It's very fresh. It picks up exactly the materials and the colors of its time to push forward. So, when I saw it in person, I just couldn't get away from it. It was great to look at. Unfortunately, it wasn't open, so we couldn't really get a feeling at the time when we were in LA. But it was definitely one of the outstanding color combinations. And, we've had this with Kia before, that they have done some very good job with the color and trim. And so consequently for me, that was, the most interesting and the most fun CMF design of 2019. So in those regards, a very big congratulations to the guys over at Kia as well as to the guys over at BMW to their award for best CMF design of the year, to the BMW Vision M Next and to the Kia Habanero. So well done to these guys. Now, number 2 in our list and in our awards list is the best UX of the year. So this can be anything from, an interface to, a control system, to an entire UX, to an entire experience in a car. And again, we will keeping this fairly open. So this will be for both a concept and a production car. And so, Eric, what do you think? What was the one that stood out for you in 2019?
All right. So for me, there's been a couple of cars that have been set aside for this product category here. My personal favorite, though, and again, I want to make a little side note, a little asterisk here. To me, UX is everything. It's all encompassing. It's design. It's not just an interface. It's not just it's everything from the marketing message to the feeling that you get when you see the car, to the lifting the door handle, everything that comes into play, the whole emotional experience, if you will, of interacting with the vehicle. And to me, I picked one of the more recent concepts that was shown at the Guangzhou Motor Show, which is GAC's record-breaking aerodynamic vehicle. And the reason I did that was because I quite liked the interior layout. I liked the way that they really looked after their demographic. GAC is a Chinese company, and they created a vehicle that has like a little rearward facing or baby seat, a seat in the rear for the teenage passenger. You have the 2 older adults, perhaps grandparents in the back seat, and then the 2 couple, the couple in the front, the mother and father driving. And I thought that interior layout was very, good and fitting for their demographic and their clientele and their market. So I thought that was to me something that deserved recognition.
Very well. Very surprising choice, actually. I mean, I think a lot of people would have thought about something a little bit more on the more traditional side, but I do agree on that one as well. I think the GAC guys have surprised us with that concept and what it was, and I think the overall package was surprisingly good coming out of them. So well done to them. For me, I have chosen the Honda E, and I know that this is probably a choice where a lot of people say like, oh, the production version is not as cool as the concept car. But for me, this entire thing, and this goes back to a little bit something that you said earlier, the idea of an entire object, like, the entire experience of that product. And for me, the Honda E just grasps the idea of who it's made for. It's made for the young people. It's made for, the generation that was born around the 2000s, like, in the 90s. It's a fresh car. And if you look into how well it integrates into that kind of lifestyle, and I just want to give one little example of this, there is a USB, and then there's an HDMI input. So you could technically take your little Nintendo retro console, plug it in, and play it in the car if you're taking a break. So these little kind of ideas in terms of the entire experience go so well into the whole idea of what this little Honda E is and who it is for. I do agree that from an experience perspective, when you see the concept car and what it went on into the production version, there could be some kind of questions about this and there could be some criticism about this. But just the entire setup is so well done towards the customer group they want to aim for, that I'm saying, like, for me, the entire experience and sitting in it at the Frankfurt show was just absolutely fantastic, and they have absolutely nailed it. Who they want to put this car for as an entire experience, as an entire, exterior, interior, everything that comes together, the color and trim as well. It was just the perfect kind of overall package for me, and the experience that we had with it was just incredible. I had great fun in that car, and I always enjoy looking at it. Always brings up a smile, and this is part of this experience as well. So for me, best UX or best experience for a car of 2019 will be going to the Honda E. And once again, congratulations to the guys over at GAC. I do apologize for that, and Honda for their respective wins on both sides over here. So let's move on. Once again, we're going through these quite quickly because we have the big ones coming up fairly soon. Eric, what do you think was the best interior of the year for either concept or production in 2019?
Well, yes. I was a bit torn, actually, because there's a few cars that I liked. One was more conceptual, and the other one was nearer production. But in the end, I picked the Infiniti QX Inspiration, I believe it was called, the concept from Detroit last year. I thought that was a very, very nice vehicle. It was one of the only cars that we saw that had Karim Habib breathe on it. I thought it was really very nice. I mean, I love the way that it was proper, like, Zen garden in there. They had a little bonsai tree in the back. It was like very, very nice and very well done and very Japanese, and again, very calming, especially with like its white color and things like that. So I thought that was really very, very nice. I mean, basically that was my pick. But then it was a very close second. As a kind of runner-up, I also liked the Tabascan, which is very different. I mean, on the one end, you've got this like fractal interior of the Infiniti with these like cushions that are depressed, all white and gold and very, shall we say, luxurious colorways with this like center screen and then, a little a rose petal in the back. I thought that was, really well done in the Infiniti. But then in the Seat Tabascan, it's very much nearer production. Now, there's a lot of things in there that I liked about detailing and things. In particular, again, it's also using copper, which is a very big trend this year in terms of demarcating electric vehicles. It's huge from a color perspective, the copper colorway. But I liked it was more kind of a focused, sporty, which is obviously what the Cupra brand is under the Seat umbrella. It's the electric performance sub-brand. And so they used things like, this one could have won in CMF as well. I mean, they used a lot of things like copper, like carbon fiber, some really cool leather, pixelated kind of, and then ultimately the way that the screen kind of isn't overly obtrusive, it was like there's one main screen in front of the steering wheel for the driver, and then another kind of swiveling screen, which serves as the infotainment user unit for the passenger rather, and the driver. So I don't know. I thought it was a very nice interior space, and so that's why it was a bit of a toss up between the Infiniti and the Cupra Tabascan for me. But in the end, I ended up picking the Infiniti, which was really very nice vehicle indeed.
And obviously, Infiniti continuing parts of their reign from our 2018 edition. Thanks to Karim Habib, who's unfortunately not there anymore, who moved on to Kia in the past few months. But thank you very much for this, Eric. on my side, I pretty much had a very clear winner. Looking back into all the shows and events and visits we had over the course of 2019, and for me that was the Peugeot 208. I remember very, very clearly, and from sitting in it at the Geneva Motor Show when it was presented. It was just fantastic. I mean, it looks great from the outside as well. They've renewed it, they've refreshed it in a very, very good way. But I was very surprised and extremely positively surprised how they developed the interior. The quality felt very, very good. Actually, it felt very solid for a car in that kind of price range. It was just extremely surprising to see that something like this is happening and possible. They had a double layer head-up system, pretty much, that is part of the dashboard, so not above the dashboard, but part of the dashboard when you look at it. So that was really cool. I did enjoy that setup. It wasn't too full. Like, the handling felt really nice in terms of grasping the steering wheel as well. So the entire layout of this was basic. It was simple, and not basic in a negative way, actually in a positive way. That I have to say, for me, that was the most pleasant experience of sitting and looking at an interior, because it wasn't overloaded. I had a little bit of the feeling this year that there was a lot of either screen only or overloading the interior quite a bit, which I personally didn't enjoy that much. So for me, Peugeot 208 had a perfect mix of everything, and well done to the team over at Peugeot. And of course, also to the Infiniti team for continuing their success in the category of Best Interior of the Year. And this is once again either for a concept or a production car. So we've talked about interior. Eric, what do you think is coming up next?
Probably exterior, I would say.
Probably exterior. Yeah. And you're 100% right. So same principle, concept and production car being put together. For the best exterior of 2019, hit me. What is your number one choice? And I think it could either be controversial or it could be very straightforward.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty straightforward. I think it's very conservative as well that I would pick this, but that's what I picked. The Porsche Taycan. To me, it's something that we've seen before. It's not revolutionary by any means. It's something that is honing on something that's been tried and trusted and true, and that we've known through Porsches forever. From a volume perspective, surfacing, like the whole thing. The forms of the exterior design of the Porsche Taycan is definitely something that I really quite enjoy, and again, because it's probably because it's so familiar.
What do you talking a little bit about, in a bit more detail about this? What was the outstanding part for you? Was it just like the manufacturing quality again, or because I remember we had conversations in the past. It was like, it's a little bit of a letdown compared to the concept, to the Mission E. So what is it that took it to the over the edge for you to say, like, this is my best one?
I don't think it's a letdown from the concept at all. I think the concept was done very long ago, and of course some things were exaggerated in that vehicle. But I think in order to bring something like that into production, and again, I think it's the combination of all sorts of things, but mostly, it's the attention to detail that's been paid. The way that the treatment of the lamps, for example. I mean, we could have had a whole interior category specifically for lighting, but there's the airways, in the front, the vents, the cooling, the just the overall surfacing, the voluptuousness of that exterior body, the way the charge point opens, for God's sake. Like, I mean, everything about that car is really extremely high end, very well considered, very well thought of, and to the point where the interior in certain respects is like I mean, look, they've got a lot of screens and things like that, which is great. And I didn't, vote for an interior design on that car specifically, because there's quite a lot of fiddliness. I watch this guy on YouTube that reviews cameras, and he always talks about fiddliness and ease of use. And when you start looking at some of the things that Porsche has put into the screen and isn't actually like a button and readily available, you think about how fussy it is. And if you look at the door, for example, for the charge point, it could be argued that is, fussy, where you've got to slide your finger below and to get it open instead of just opening it like you do on a Tesla. But that, to me, is what differentiates Porsche and Tesla. It's the quality, it's the luxury aspect, it's the feel that you have that you don't, with a Tesla product. And that, to me, is what made it stand out. I mean, everything. I don't think there's one bad piece on that car. I mean, of course, it'll tick certain boxes in different colorways, which is amazing on how that car, because we saw one in green in Munich, and it was like really subdued and sedate almost. It was like not something that you would consider costing as much as it does, but I think from a volume perspective, from a just electric sports car package perspective, and again, an exterior design, family feel and surfacing perspective, that is what gave it my vote.
Interesting that you said Tesla just now, comparing it to the Porsche. For me, and I know this is controversial because we had this as part of a podcast discussion already, but for me, the exterior of the year is a Tesla Cybertruck. And not necessarily from an aesthetic perspective. I think there's a lot to discuss. I think there's a lot that can be said on the pro and on the con side for the Cybertruck. But for me, I think where it stands out is just what it means to the industry. And so I'm taking this a little bit just, aside from pure aesthetics, but this is so different. This is so pushing. I know, you think a little bit differently about this. It's vulgar. It's, it's everything that nowadays culture to a certain degree is. But this is the kind of thing for me. It brings this cultural aspect fully back into the car, into the mobility design. And it's going to challenge everything over the next few years, on what we think of transportation design, mobility design. And for me, it's really that thought about, we want you to think differently. And I know from a pure aesthetics perspective, people can challenge this and they might not agree with me on putting this as the best exterior of the year. And probably the best exterior is a little bit of an exaggeration. But for me, I've changed this a little bit. It's the most important exterior of 2019. Maybe not when you just compare it to the Porsche from a surfacing perspective. It obviously has different manufacturing methods and all these things that, Elon Musk presented in his presentation. But from a pure challenge perspective and what this thing, might change in the industry, this is probably the biggest one that we have seen in a very long time. So for me, the Cybertruck is the best / most important exterior for any kind of concept or production car of 2019. And of course, we don't know if this car is yet production, even though Elon says it is. But, there have been quite a few questions already about this being a production car. But for me, is the clear winner for this category.
Yeah, well,
you don't sound happy about this, my friend.
No, I mean, that's your vote. I mean, of course, calling it important is different than calling it best. Best as in good? Hell no. And that's my personal opinion. Important, yes. Important for the right reasons? Perhaps not. Marketing potential? Yes, absolutely. But anyway, I think we can revisit this in a little bit later on.
We can, and of course, if you want to have a little bit further discussion on the Cybertruck or listen to our discussion, check out the, I think it's episode 15, where we talk about the Cybertruck in very much detail on the pod. So number 5, and we're taking a quick break here, or like a quick sidestep before we get into like our main 3 categories that are going to be a bit more extended. we don't want to say that things are, bad or things we don't like and all these kind of things. We have a very strong opinion, but we felt it was necessarily to share a little bit maybe on this, what we thought disappointed this year. So the next two categories will be what we think was the most disappointing concept car design of the year, and also the most disappointing production car design of the year. And Eric, let's actually start with what we would call the most disappointing concept car design of 2019. And please do share with me and with the audience what your choice has been for that.
All right. On my side, I put this list together rather quickly, so I remember the things that I remember most recently, but I'm sure there's been some bad ones in the past because it hasn't been a fantastic year. But the one that really stood out for me, I think, was this FAW. So is the Hongqi brand E115, which was the SUV shown in Frankfurt in September. And the reason I chose that vehicle in particular was because it's an SUV. They had no interior. It had gold trim and silver plated trim. It was all over the place. The grille was ridiculous. But even if you get past the typology, I guess the underlying question for me with this type of vehicle, which has to be said, was actually designed in China and not in Europe. And, even though it was badged Hongqi, was not actually the product of Giles Taylor's team in Munich, to my understanding. So anyway, that being said, it seems like, the Chinese are really in a position to lead. And yet then you see things like this hitting the floor. And it's like, it's a massive missed opportunity. It's not anything innovative or new or fresh, or, it didn't even have an interior, for God's sake. And the colorways and the mix of material was just so jarring that's why I picked it. That's basically why I picked that as my most disappointing concept car design.
I can understand this. There was a lot of criticism on that. I think even the European media was just a bit confused about this car, being there as well. I would like to add one thing. We're not going to talk about one specific car, but this will be the, on the all-time worst list. If you remember back to Geneva, there was this Hispano-Suiza thing. Let's really call it thing. I don't know if it was concept car or production car, but I have not included this into my list, but this was one of the absolute worst ones we've seen in a very long time. Absolutely terrible. If you have not seen it, don't do yourself a favor and look at it. It's good to forget about it. If you have seen it, look at it again and wonder how this can actually make it to a show. Speaking of actually making it to a show,
but that's not from a big company, though.
Well,
that's
yes,
not
but
from a major automaker.
No, I do agree on that one, of course. But that, even for a small automaker, was so incredibly bad that it needs a special mention here. But yeah, putting it back to the big automakers, for me, the most disappointing concept car of the year was the Lagonda all-terrain concept. It came out in Geneva this year, and it was presented in a very tight little room almost that you could only access from one side, and then you had to walk around it with very little space in between. So you didn't really get a nice little feeling of what a Lagonda is, which is a very luxury vehicle. If people remember back to the original Aston Maritn Lagonda, which probably had one of the absolute coolest interiors ever, super digital, even back in the 70s, I think, when it came out, or early 80s, which is always something that I will remind myself of if you want to have a futuristic car, is that original Lagonda. Aston have in the past pushed the Lagonda a little bit, and there were, I think a very, very small amount of production batches of a new Lagonda sedan that came out. I don't know if it was a big production series or if it was just a small prototyping stage. I'm not 100% sure, but they went into the right direction. And then this thing came out, which was absolutely huge. It tried to be very luxurious, but for me, it had some very strange details in there. There was almost this floating, I don't know what it was, like a button that I just necessarily didn't understand. Maybe that's also just me. But it's something for me is where I was hoping for great things, like, cool Lagonda with like a lot of technology and all these things. And then it just became this, old country house pretty much that looked quite posh, but didn't really keep what it was promising. And I also didn't like the exterior look out of it. I think it looked a little bit out of proportion. It looked, the color didn't help, which was, I think, a dark green, if I remember correctly, with a lot of, gold hints. So it just didn't work it out for me. And it was the one that I remembered most, vividly, in terms of just like, I didn't really like it. But you could also mention the Audi AI Trail, which was shown in Frankfurt, which I just didn't get why it was there. I mean, it seemed like it was such a waste of money just to do that kind of car. That was a disappointment. But in terms of the expectations that I had, and then getting the result, unfortunately, Lagonda is on the number one for me here. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, the Lagonda actually fit into my list, but in different areas, which we'll get into later.
We will get there later, and we'll be very excited to see where the Lagonda will be coming up again on Mr. Gallina's side. And yeah, so before we get to the really big ones, the absolute last one on the single one. So most disappointing production car production car design of the year, Eric. What's your choice on the raspberry of car design?
All right. So again, I'm going large companies here, and I'm going by something that I was initially extremely enthusiastic about when I saw it in production form. And then subsequently, I was just really let down by the way that it transferred into production. And when I say transferred, they actually built both of these side by side. They had the production version already done. They were just like, in typical Japanese, so there's a clue, typical Japanese fashion, they decided to tune the car and make it look ridiculously awesome. And then they came out with the prototype, and now you guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And then ultimately the final series production model, which was unveiled in Frankfurt earlier this year. Now, my pick for the most disappointing is purely from an exterior perspective, because I quite like the interior, but it's got to be the Honda E. That to me, like from a front end, like a facial graphic perspective, the front and rear ends just lost so much when they decided to lose the kind of squared off appeal and the little detailing that made that car such a product. It could have been an iconic little piece of design. That it could have been the new Beetle, but now to me it's a car with a big screen, some wood in there, a couple of it's spacious, but hey, it's electric. Let's hope so, right? Even though it's quite diminutive in size. But I think what really lets it down to me is the DRG. That's to me is kind of, and then the wheel size, of course. But hey, they gotta save some money. They're not going to put 18s or whatever it was, 19s or 20s on the concept version.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just the wheels I think are too small for that body. If they just made it a little bit bigger, if they made the wheels, the headlamps and the tail lamps squared off, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So that to me was a disappointment just from a purely personal perspective as to what my expectations were. And then ultimately they were not really met. And then when you look at the price point on that car as well, it's damn near £30,000. So no.
I'm not angry with you at that one. I mean, I've mentioned the Honda E before, but I can agree on that one. I think it's more about the concept was so good that it was almost impossible to keep these expectations for the production car. And I think then when we actually got to see the production car, it was like, oh man, this is too bad, and we want to have this concept. But that's sometimes the way it goes, and it's oftentimes what the designers say as well. We can do great concepts, but once we put it into production, it can become very, very tricky. For me, I actually have two that I would say are most disappointing production ones for me. The first one is the Volkswagen ID.3. And that is mainly because of its interior. I understand the exterior. It's supposed to be an electric Golf, even though there is an actual electric Golf. I've just seen it, a couple of them today on the Autobahn driving back to Munich. The ID.3, I think, could have used a bit more refinement time. It's, again, I've said this in the last episode when we were reviewing a show, which was the LA Motor Show. And I've said this about the ID Space Vision, I think it was. It's an absolute solid car, and the ID.3 is exactly that as well. But with all the hype that was made from this, with all the excitement, expectations that also Volkswagen pushed into this, I was quite let down, especially by the interior. Didn't expect a lot from the exterior. It is Volkswagen after all. They're a more conservative company. But the interior of the ID.3 was unfortunately not what I was hoping for. I was hoping that they could, push a little bit further. I didn't like the infotainment system that was on there. It also felt quite cheap, which I think is a byproduct of building an electric car. And I remember, sitting in the car with a couple of people, and our producer Eddie was in there as well, and Sam Livingston. And we just had the feeling that something was missing. And I was actually quite sad because I was looking forward to the ID.3. But it's, it seems like they had to stop at some point. And, it just felt really disappointing. And, I was just hoping for a bit more and a little bit more exciting. So it's not necessarily just a design perspective. It's more like a gut feeling, and it's more like an, experience feeling about it as well. And the other one, will show up again on my side later, but I think is more a general kind of disappointment, because I think it was almost impossible to not disappoint us, which is the new Defender. And I want to make one thing very clear. The new Defender is not a bad looking car at all. I think the new Defender is just almost impossible as the successor of a car that has been running for 70 years, that everybody that and I know, not even in the car design industry, they know what the Defender is. It's almost like the G-Class. If you ask the people, they can almost draw it for you, even if they don't have any drawing skills. And why the thing is disappointing for me is that, I did expect that it was not going to go into the same direction anymore. It was going towards a different kind of customer group, but it was just very plasticky. It was trying to. It was not the Defender anymore. I think for me, it was more like an SUV direction that looked a little bit like a Defender, took some design cues from the original Defender, but it was obviously not as classical anymore. There were a lot of details on there that I think, could have done a little bit differently, especially on the interior. I think they've learned negatively from the Velar. I've never really been a big fan of the Velar. And again, for me, like the 90, so like the smaller one, I preferred. I just liked it a little bit better than the 110. But again, that comes from me with the expectations that we had for a new Defender, that it's almost impossible to give us that kind of feeling of like, yeah, this is exactly what we want. So this comes with a little bit of an asterisk, and not in that negative way. But unfortunately, the Defender alongside the ID.3 are my disappointments for production car design of 2019.
Yes. But again, it's kind of on the same note for me, because you had a certain expectation that you were that you wanted that to live up to. I mean, shit, it looks a hell of a lot better than DC 100 that they came out with a few years ago.
Well, yes,
but that was very much like a toy, whereas this, I had, I was with my kids in some shopping mall like last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and we saw one. And my kids were drawn to it. It was just, but I can definitely appreciate your sentiment about the authenticity of the materials chosen. Certainly, it definitely lets it down again at, these things are not cheap. It's like they're pretty expensive, 4x4s, very capable 4x4s. So you'd think that they'd want to put some more durable and rugged materials instead of just doing something that's pretty much just for show. Anyway, there was a few things wrong with that, but I would go out on a limb here, and being based in England, I might get some flack for this and catch some flack for this as well. But it's not like the Brits do some, super high end quality stuff, man. Ever really. And even if you look at like high end supercars and stuff, it's really appalling. I mean, some of the detail work and things, just ultimate fit and finish, is not nearly on par with what the Germans can produce, or even the Japanese. So anyway, that I can agree with you on that front.
Yeah, and again, this is not the worst or any kind of that. We consciously avoided that because calling something the worst is always very emotional, of course, as well. So that's why we said disappointing. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad design, as we will see a little bit later on, but it's just the overall feeling behind it. So, all right, Eric, are you ready for the three big ones? Yeah,
yes.
You're ready to go.
I think so.
Really hard.
So yeah, let's do it.
All right, now I'm just going to explain this a little bit. So the last 6 categories that we had were literally just singles. So that means we each picked one specific car that we liked for each category. The next 3 that we have, which will be Design Team of the Year, Concept Car Design of the Year, and Production Car Design of the Year, will have each a ranking from 3 to 1. And what we will do, Eric, just to kind of explain this also to the listeners, we will start with 3. You will say your 3, I will say my 3. We go to 2, and then we go to 1. Mm-hmm. And we will do that for all 3 categories. And we are starting with the Design Team of the Year. So your 3rd place Design Team of 2019 goes to, drum roll,
goes to Tesla. And the main reason why I chose this is because, well, it's pretty self-evident. They were tasked to do something. They did it. Elon Musk came in and he said, I want that. And they made it. And that's, so that to me, they rank up there. They deserve a place on that totem pole, mainly because, and this is particularly for the younger listeners out there. If you want to create art, go be an artist. Because car design is a business, and you're going to have a boss, and he's going to tell you what to do, and you're going to have to, when he says jump, you're going to have to say how high, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's about selling product, and it's about answering to a guy who, is basically calling the shots. That's the way that it is. That's the Cybertruck, in my opinion, and I don't have this, internally by way of Tesla or anything. I don't have insider information, but to me, the Tesla design team deserves hats off because they did what was asked of them. They did a pretty good job. I don't agree with what it is that they ultimately did, not from an aesthetic perspective, but for more philosophical underlying issues that I have with that. But at the end of the day, they were asked to deliver, and hell, they delivered, man. Them and the marketing team worked jointly to create something where, damn, the marketing, that no one does not know what the Cybertruck is, basically. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think the design team deserves a lot of credit for that.
Very well agree. I will have Tesla on this list, but it comes a little bit later on. For me, a number 3 comes maybe a little bit as a surprise because I just mentioned them on the most disappointing production car side, but this is going to be Volkswagen. And I was actually struggling quite a long time with this number 3 spot. And I gave it to Volkswagen because the continuous quality that they're delivering, one also has to always remember they are not making show cars or concept cars the way other studios do it and other companies are doing it. They always base them on the principles of feasibility. So internally at Volkswagen, you do a car and you present it to the world, and it has the option of becoming a feasible production car and a series production car. So we should not see them on the way of the crazy things. and they have some ups and they had definitely some downs in 2019. But I think in terms of the quality that they're delivering, and a very steady kind of process with all these things that they're showing, they're one of the companies that always show something. Volvo famously set out the Geneva Motor Show. They weren't there for Frankfurt, if I remember. So, they were picking their spots quite a bit, whereas Volkswagen is always there and they always show something. And it's never the best of the show, but it's never the worst of the show. So it's extremely solid. So for me, Volkswagen is number 3, just because they're extremely solid and they're extremely consistent in what they're doing. And I think that should also be appreciated, because that's a very difficult thing to do. If you've, doing a very consistent job over years and years and years, that's probably one of the hardest things to do in life in general, not just at work.
Absolutely concur on that. Now, there is one little caveat that I should, the design team of the year, I'm not a fan of this category, if I'm honest, because within a company, there's a lot of different departments that need to come together and work together. And the reason why Volkswagen, I think, is on your list is because they have a very talented team of engineers as well that provides them with these platforms and these things that they can then work with. So I think there's, a mention there that should be put in, a little asterisk perhaps, but...
100% agree from my side. And also, we have to understand that the challenges that they have, because they cannot go crazy, such as, I don't know, Aston Martin, when they put out some kind of concepts. We talk about concept cars later.
Right.
Where, you can just do pretty much whatever you want. So Volkswagen don't do that. So I think that's, again, the balance. So for us, the design team of the year is really the balance of everything that goes into it, maybe with some always exceptions, but then we will explain that in a bit more detail. But let's crack on. Number 2 place, silver medal in the design team of the year 2019, Mr. Gallina, goes to...
Now, this is funny because there's a link with my number 1 in terms of why I picked number 2. And maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Hopefully it does, and you'll see later. I picked Seat/Cupra. And the reason I did that was because obviously Seat is also working on Cupra. And we've been to visit that studio before. We know what, the size of the team and what it is that they're doing over there in Barcelona. They're an extremely talented bunch of individuals that are really embracing digital, that are doing extremely well from a... it's not the only studio that's embracing digital, but nonetheless, they are doing extremely well in terms of VR and entirely digital tool sets in order to create products and vehicles that are very appealing, and that are done in much less time. So definitely harnessing the efficiency of these tool sets. So that to me is something that's very interesting. Also, I like the fact that, like Skoda, I picked Seat mainly because of the point that I'm going to make in the next paragraph here. But I picked Seat because, like Skoda, they have a certain appeal that is bringing it back to being a Spanish brand that it originally was. Mm-hmm. And you can see that really in the Cupra. It's more fiery. It's more dancing, whatever, that dance that they dance over there. It's more peppery, slice of life, spicy. You know what I mean? And so I think what the Seat team, who also works on Cupra, has managed to do with the Cupra offshoot and nameplate is phenomenal. I think it's a very appealing product. It's entering into a segment where no Seat branded product could really. So they're very much acting as a startup there, and because new sells, they're doing an exceptional job with the sportiness aspect, the electrification, and just the overall kind of character of those vehicles that speaks to it being a Spanish brand. So, I applaud them for that.
What's not to like? I mean, you've mentioned that we had the chance to visit the studio, and I agree. And I think as it's again the team aspect of it. We've mentioned color and trim earlier, which we didn't, include of the color and trim of the year, but I think it's the entire connection and how they work together. It's an extremely modern way. It's also great that they're being kept alone in that sense, that the influence of, other parts of the Volkswagen group is to a certain degree limited so that they can develop what they're doing. And it's a good step forward, I think, for them, and definitely well deserved for 2019. And I have big hopes for them in 2020. Yeah, I'm really hoping for the next cool stuff coming out in Geneva, and very excited to see what's going to happen there.
Most definitely.
All right, now my number 2. I'll keep that nice and clean. I've picked Kia. Kia for me have shown just. Again, I'm going with this kind of consistency level because I think it's something just to kind of push again in the future. I've seen them in European shows. I've seen them in Chinese shows. I've seen them in American shows. And the general just quality that they're delivering nowadays. And this is still a lot of the work from Peter Schreier, even though he's not officially the head of Kia anymore. Now it's Karim Habib, of course. But just the sheer quality that we are now expecting from Kia and what they're delivering, day in, day out at all these shows. There's a reason I gave the Habanero the color and trim of the year. But I'm just very impressed with the consistency that they have. And, it was for me a very clear number 2. We're getting to number 1 now, which was for me very clear as well. But well done to the global Kia team, and keep up the work. I'm expecting big things again in 2020 because what you've delivered all across the globe in 2019 was very impressive. And for me, I'm looking forward to 2020 with them.
Yes, I do like what Kia is doing on a number of different levels. Their concepts are super cool. Their production product is perhaps not as avant-garde as their conceptual products are kind of the direction that they're leaning towards. But again, their concept cars. So, but I do like the way that they're progressing.
All right, now let's finish this up. Gold medal, and our number 1, or let's say first of all, your number 1 for the design team of the year. Please, Eric, do share it with us.
All right. So my design team, again, like I said before, is related to my number 2 because this is a company that is doing 2 things. They're sharing the same design team, but doing very different designs. And no, it's not Nissan and Infiniti. They actually don't share a lot of designers. There's, they do on some projects. But anyway, that's a little side note. My pick for number 1 was Polestar because Polestar is actually the Volvo design team. Maximilian Missoni, who is actually the head of the Polestar brand, is also exterior design director at Volvo, and their team is very small, but does a very good job in terms of showing us what the future is for an electric car coming from a Swedish brand. And again, maybe it's a Swedish brand, maybe it's more of an international brand, seeing as they're all being built in China, and they're backed heavily by China. But at the same time, everything from a design perspective takes place in Gothenburg. And I'm basing this based on the output that we've seen from them this year, last year and the year before. And I mean, I may have even picked these guys last year in terms of design team, but I can't remember now. But the point is, they are continuously putting out products that you're like, oh, wow, that's kind of like if you look at the Polestar 2, that's pretty much on the same package as an ID3. And they've created something that's a world apart. That to me is just like, compelling design. It's a cross between a conventional sedan and, an Audi. It's basically an Audi all-road, but a bit more butch, I don't know. It's very good. It's like a cross country was back in the day with, when Volvo was creating those cross countries. Wagons, high riding wagons, all wheel drive, capable. And they've taken that kind of from their DNA, if you will, and they've progressed it into something that's extremely modern, very cool, and very much of the time. Again, like the powertrains in Volvos, is not something that we discuss often, but it's something that is kind of much more relevant than something else. For example, like putting 4-cylinder or 3-cylinder power plants in cars is something that is kind of necessary. Now, at the same time, Volvo is and was the pioneer of holding individual events where they're flying designers all over the place to come to their Shanghai opening or whatever. So, when you kind of factor that in, you think, how green is that really? But ultimately, from a design perspective, I do very much value the work that the Polestar and the Volvo design team is doing. And if you look at just some of the recent things that have come out, particularly the Polestar 2, which was shown in Geneva last year, I think it's just case in point to what can be done, within a design team that's actually forward thinking and coming up with something different and new and fresh. And, I thought it was a really great idea.
I cannot argue with you. I like the stuff that Volvo is doing. Polestar, I love the Polestar 1. I love that, when it was a concept as well. The Polestar 2 is good looking as well. It's being built obviously in co-sharing a platform with Geely in particular and Lynk & Co. So they're using all the options they have to making this the most economical way of developing cars, and they're pushing it to the level. I think what Polestar and Volvo are really doing great is they know how they can push. They know how they're a design driven company as well, and you can see that in the product and in terms of the development, and also the team absolutely love what they're doing as well. Now, I'm putting this controversial because my theme was consistency. Now I'm changing this for my number one. My number one is Tesla. And just simply for one reason, and I'm looking at the Cybertruck and also looking into the ATV, it's obviously, design team plus Elon Musk. I think they're almost, impossible to separate. But they just had the balls to do something such as the Cybertruck. And just to do that and bring it out, challenge everybody, probably seeing in the way in between that Rivian is coming out, which is again, another great little design team up in Michigan, with what could have been the Tesla pickup truck, and then they're coming out with the Cybertruck. Just having the balls to do that. I mean, hats off to that. A lot of other companies would have never done that. A lot of companies would not have dared to do something like that, and just to do that and really step out and let's say we put this into production. That's just, where I have to say I have to put those guys in number one. And I think it was, of course, very recent, but it was a very clear winner for me to put them on number one.
All right. So,
all right.
Good.
All right. Now, 2 to go, Eric. Let's go. Concept car design of 2019. Same game as before. We started 3 and we go all the way to 1. Do you want to start again? Let's go for your number 3 to go down.
So I put this. I put number 3 as the Tesla Cybertruck, and the reason I did that was for the reasons that you outlined earlier, and that was because it was not from a design perspective, but from a sheer kind of what it did and how it resonated and things like that, and its impact on the industry and its resonance within people that don't even know and care about cars know about this thing. So I put that in there mainly because it's an important car, right? It's an important car for this year. But I definitely put in the concept car category because that thing, I do not foresee that thing making it to production without any real severe, altercations, alterations rather, because that to me is, a 6-meter long truck. I just, there's so many things that will not make that, will not make it to production without being somehow changed. It needs to be. But anyway, at the same time, I did kind of have a runner-up in that category, which was to me, and again, you didn't like this, but I did, and that is the Aston Martin Lagonda all-terrain concept. Now, when we talk about relevance, perhaps, in terms of environmental sustainability and all the rest, perhaps a big, luxury SUV isn't the best thing to be doing. But again, this is an electric SUV, and it's got a completely different aesthetic than we've seen anywhere else. It's so that to me it's not like it doesn't look bad, but it is very much different. It's not it's not the DBX, that's for sure. And I think in order to move Lagonda because again, Lagonda is its own brand, right? It's Aston Martin Lagonda, just like it's Jaguar Land Rover. So I think the Lagonda all-terrain concept that was shown in Geneva this year kind of pulls on previous concepts that were shown from the Lagonda perspective, but also it's I think the way that it appeals to people is different, and maybe the reason why you weren't kind of identifying with it is because for someone that was born in the 80s or whatever, they can kind of see what's going on in terms of like the velour interior, in terms of like certain aspects that give it this kind of old school appeal. So anyone that's like from the 60s or 70s or 80s rather kind of sees that, and I think that would be the design team, right? Anyway, so I thought that was quite good, especially considering what the biggest market is in the world right now. What are they buying? Big luxury electric people carriers, and that's basically what this is in a super extreme high luxury category.
Yeah, that's why we have these lists, not as one but actually a separate list, because I mentioned this as a disappointment, so I didn't really like it. But what I did like as my third place, and this is something very personal, because I think I spoke to a lot of people back when this came out in Geneva, and there was just like, is it super original? Is it not original? I actually didn't care, because it was simple and it was going back to days such as, original E-Type, the DB5s, the DB6s of that time, which is the Piech Mark 1, a very simple car. I can fully agree if people tell me, it's like, look, there's nothing too special about it. It's, it's kept quite simple. It's not too much daring in there. But for me, it was just a car I really enjoyed looking at. And that was pretty much it. It's just like, yes, I like that. There are some tiny little flaws with it that I'm maybe not 100% convinced about, but I just like looking at it. And so I don't need to say much more than that. It's just Piech Mark 1, number 3 for me, and a very clear number 3, because up until today, when I see a picture, I like looking at it.
Yeah, it's not a bad car. I mean, it's like you say, it has a lot of appeal from a historic perspective. 2-seat GT, it's a very nice vehicle. I can't argue.
All right, so we're getting closer to our number 1. Number 2, silver medalist for Concept Car Designer of the Year, Mr. Gallina. Please share it with me and with the audience.
Yes, well, so my second pick is Fiat and the 120. I really like that vehicle because, again, it takes a bit of heritage from the Fiat brands with the Panda. That to me is something personal as well. My aunt had one when I was a kid. Little black original one, which was amazing, tooling around France in one of those things in 1980 or whatever the hell it was. And I do have fond memories. But again, I do love what Fiat has done with that concept. It's personalizable. It's about what you need. It's about, putting in certain batteries when you, if you want to keep the charge up. It's about, it has a little bit of like Opel Junior thing going on in there in terms of the IP, and you can put things. It's modular. You can put what you need in, take what you need out. You can put in a a small screen or a larger screen, extend it, maybe include your iPad. I mean, there's so many cool ideas in that car, especially from an interior perspective. The exterior as well, because, we all know that Parisians and Italians love to park by touch. So, all of these, these things that are like, very useful when you think about a practical application of, having soft body panels in the front that won't dent or ding up, or maybe not in white, but whatever. I mean, it's a similar taste, which again, designers really loved the Cactus. I loved the Cactus when it first came out, the original one. But then obviously the buying public did not share that sentiment, and then they went back to creating something that was pretty run of the mill, and they lost all the innovation on the on the body side of that vehicle, which is to me a shame. But anyway, I think the 120 has really resonated. I mean, I did a video with Klaus Busse in Geneva about that car, which is on the Form Trends YouTube page, also on the website, and I've gotten a lot of really positive comments on that vehicle, and a lot of people really like it, myself included, which is why it's up in there as my number 2 for the concept car design of the year.
The 120 was a very close second for me for color and trim, CMF, because I just liked it. I'm usually not a big fan of white cars, but this one, kind of had nice touches with color and all these things in Geneva. And I certainly share your sentiment. However, I keep the car small. For me, the number 2 was the Genesis Mint. And this was the last car that Sasha Silipanov worked on before he left Genesis to move over to Koenigsegg. And it was just, I just enjoyed it, from the colorways to the interior. You can argue a little bit that the interior was maybe a little bit too much with leather, too light of a leather. But I was surprised from a company such as Genesis, which is, aiming towards a luxury level, to see a car that small. That was number 1. But you can clearly see that there's enough sportiness in there to make it just a really cool looking thing. It might not be your average, small car, because it's obviously aimed for a little bit of a different direction and different kind of group of interested people in that. But the overall thing is, I just really enjoyed, and also the team behind it that did that car use the idea of luxury and put it into a small car, which is extremely difficult. It hasn't worked out for a lot of people. And as a concept car, was really good for me. I love the doors. I love the way you look from the back into the front. I like the interior with the steering wheel and everything with it. It's quite simple, quite basic. And the stance is just incredible for such a small car. The overhangs are not really that big. It was just, again, similar to the PX. I just loved looking at it. And in the end, that's, what design in total is all about as well. It's yes, it is a business, but it also gives us a smile on our face. And I think the Genesis Mint did that for me. And how cool is the name if they call it Mint? It's almost like they call it just like the color. Not too many people doing that.
Yeah, no, I really did like that car a lot. I would have loved to see that in person, but I didn't make it out to New York, which is where Hyundai is always making splashes. So all I've got to go on is a couple of images and some renderings. But, I know a lot of people within that team, and certainly Sasha, and that was great to see them come out with something, like you said, that has an incredible stance, a new interpretation of luxury in a very compact package. There's some cool details, like, the rear doors, of course. The front face of that car, I think, is really easily identifiable and recognizable. Mm-hmm. It's not it's not overly shouty and in your face. It's really quite elegant, but also it still has a Genesis kind of vibe to it. Again, because it's an electric car, it doesn't need this massive grille. But I thought it was overall, yes, very, very pleasing indeed. The interior probably more so than the exterior, even, and the exterior was superb. So, yeah, hats off to the team over there, because they really did do a fabulous job.
Well done to Genesis, and obviously, to all the other guys that we have mentioned before. Mm. And we're getting to a first now in this episode of Gestalten. We have a winner that we both agree on, Eric. This doesn't happen that often. I would
Really?
like to say. I think it does not happen that very often. Yeah, we have individually when we picked all of our our winners,
Oh,
we have
yes.
individually picked the same guys for concept car design of 2019. And I'll leave the honors up to you. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Who did we pick?
We picked the Citroen Ami 1, the little tiny car that was unveiled in Geneva earlier this year. And that to me was just beautiful little thing. Using the Ami name from back in the day into something really like very product design, very thoroughly modern, in my opinion, very much relevant and very much of the era. A little compact car that, from a practical perspective, had a lot of really cool things going on about it. From the interchangeable doors to,
Yeah.
so many cool things, to the like chevrons built into the undercarriage, like in the front and on the side of the vehicle. I mean, so many little details that were just really sublime, I thought. And so, from a manufacturing perspective, it would be cheaper to produce. Again, this is only a concept car for now. But I thought it was, in terms of the problems that, the issues that we're having in terms of transportation design in urban environments where a whole lot of people live nowadays, and reinterpreting or reinterpret. Can't even speak, man. Anyway, an old nameplate for something so thoroughly modern, this little box has an incredible amount of character. And then the interior, absolutely fantastic use of space as well.
Yeah.
Just for like a little 2-passenger car, the way the seats are, just laid out and from one another, and you still have some cargo space in the back. I mean, it's more appealing than a smart car in a lot of ways. And I was a big fan of this on many levels.
Yeah, I mean, I picked it as well, and you've outlined everything pretty much 100% on what I agree. For me, I'm not a big fan of boxes, but this is a tiny little box which I just absolutely loved. It fit in perfectly into the idea of Citroen as a very French brand. This is something that would work extremely well in Paris or pretty much any mega city in the world nowadays. Doesn't take up a lot of space. The interchangeable doors are incredible. I love that concept. And that was obviously the last project I think Alex Malval actively worked on in terms of a concept car before he went over to Mercedes.
Yeah.
And man, what a goodbye! I mean, this was incredible, and I think it blew us just away when we saw it in Geneva. There was nothing similar to that anywhere, like remotely, in terms of not just forward thinking, but also in terms of the idea of a manufacturing process that this could actually come through. So absolutely fantastic. And I think, a well-deserved number one, and clearly it stuck to our minds since we saw it, almost 9 months ago now. So well done to everybody at Citroen. Well done to Alex Malval, obviously not at Citroen anymore, but now being at Mercedes, and also of course to Pierre Leclerc leading the team over there. And I hope they can show us something really cool again in 2020 at the Geneva show. Maybe something that goes into a similar direction. Who knows?
Well, I don't think the Citroen team is ever short on ideas. They've done some really cool stuff. PSA in general is doing some pretty amazing stuff. I mean, I've always been very impressed by what it is that they have put out. So anyway, so hats off to the team, and let's move on to the next category, shall we?
Let's do it. Let's finish it up. This will be the last category on this pod, and it will be production car design of 2019. Eric, your bronze medal, your number 3 for 2019.
All right. Again, for this category, I think I had 2. But my main one was the Peugeot 208. That was the one that I thought should get it, mainly because there was so many cool things about that little vehicle. Again, I think it's way harder to make a successful design in a compact package than in anything else, right? If you've got room to play, and certainly if you've got like dash to axle and stuff, and you can make a classic GT, it's, those are pretty good ingredients. But when you start looking at, how can we make this compact and still make it look fresh and inviting and appealing from, sexy, quote unquote, factor, I think the Peugeot 208 really hit it out of the park. And that was something that, Gilles Vidal's team has been doing very, very well. There's nothing that I dislike about that car. I think perhaps if there was one kind of nitpicky thing, it's that the headlamps are perhaps a little bit too big. Is that's the only one that I would say. But again, they play with the branding, with the griffon in there, the cat claw.
Yeah.
And so that, it's cool. And it's got different identities as well, depending on, the GT line or the E or whatever. They look quite, they can have very different characters. But to me, the rear 3/4 of that car with the, the little lamps and the black strip running across, which kind of gives the illusion of a full width tail lamp, which is very much de rigueur right now. The surfacing on the body side, the whole, like, that exterior design to me is very, very good. And then at the same time, as you mentioned earlier, the interior is amazing. I think it's a very, very good interior. It's playing on the theme that was initially set out by Amco Leenaerts, and thinking back in like 2012 or something, which is like way long ago, but they've really fine-tuned it. It's matured. The compact steering wheel, the, very small IP. Everything is like really, like, I remember sitting in that car as well and being like, yeah, everything is like here to hand. And, the perceived quality in that was really quite high. In my, when I remember sitting there and grabbing the steering wheel, touching the little toggle switches. They're kind of fake toggle switches, but nonetheless, there's a really good kind of spring effect to those switches in the center console. There was a lot of very cool pieces that all come together really nice and harmoniously in that interior. So there was a lot to like on that vehicle, and that to me was from a production standpoint, one of my favorites. I'd love to actually own one of these. And the sheer amount of content that was in this vehicle as well is astounding. When
and especially for its size.
Yeah,
for its size as well.
Absolutely amazing. So hats off to the Peugeot design team on the 208. And then the other one that I was kind of toying with was the Mustang Mach-E. And I'm probably gonna, some people will, I'm sure, disagree. If you can get past the silly name, I don't think it is a Mustang, but I was kind of convinced otherwise when I spoke to some of the design team. It is a kind of ballsy move to come out and say Mustang is this now and no longer this V8 thing that you guys know, even though it will still be. So that's going to be a bit of a topic of confusion, I think, as well, because if it continues to soldier on as a V8 powered coupe and convertible, there's going to be some confusion. But they need to move that into the future, and so they've decided to make a little SUV, call it a Mach-E. There's some cool elements to that car, and I think just purely because of Ford's first step into electrification is why I was considering it to be a contender here. Ultimately, the 208 won out, and I think that the Mustang Mach-E, whilst good, is not something that it made it onto my list, regrettably, and the 208 trumped that.
Yeah, I agree on the 208. I don't agree on the Mustang because I've seen it in real life and I didn't like it. But this is why we have these lists, is that we can agree to disagree, which is, a very specific feat also to design in general. And agreeing to disagree, I've mentioned this earlier, like, for most disappointing production car, I've mentioned the new Defender, but I also want to mention the Defender as my number 3 for the production car design of the year. And I want to explain this very, very briefly. I don't see the new Defender as a successor of the old Defender, even though it's a new Defender and it's still called Defender and all these things. But I like, and I've mentioned this on the Honda as well, I like producty cars. I love the Honda EV concept. I also like the Honda E, even though it does have some letdowns in terms of production. But it's the same for the Defender. I like this producty approach to it. I've always liked the G-Class, or G-Wagon, I think people call it in English, the G-Class from Mercedes as well. And Defender goes exactly into that kind of direction. For me, I would specify it on the Defender 90, which is the smaller version. I just prefer it from the looks perspective to the 110, which is the bigger one. Of course, it does have its negative points. The production quality, as you've mentioned earlier, it's very typical to JLR. A lot of plastic. Could use a step up, especially in terms of the pricing. But I just enjoy it. I think it's good for what a Defender is in the modern day era. In the modern day era, it has nothing to do with the old one. So let's set that completely aside. But when it comes to modern day SUVs, you've mentioned this with the Volvos earlier. I mean, we have a company car which is the XC60 from Volvo. The Defender for me is on that levels where I'm saying, hey, yeah, this is a good looking SUV, and hey, there's very few of them. So if you achieve that kind of feat of making it a good looking SUV, you deserve to be up there. So for me, the new Defender is number 3 for 2019.
Right on. All right.
Right on. Okay, we have 2 to go.
The Defender. I like the Defender. I mean, I'd get one, if I could, but I'd go for the 110 over the 90 any day of the week.
Yeah, well, that's how we're a little bit different, but that's okay. All right, 2 to go. Number 2, Eric, silver medal for production car design of 2019.
All right, so number 2 is something that I've already mentioned, and that is the Polestar 2. Again, I really like what they've done with that brand. The Polestar 1, we've seen that in concept car form as a Volvo many, many years ago now. But I think this Polestar 2 is really showing a brand kind of on its way. Gaining some momentum, really starting to develop as its own identity with its own personality. And I really like the Polestar too, man. It's the sedan typology mixed in with some urban ruggedness or even off-road Scandinavian ruggedness, if you will. The interior is nice, very simple. What it is that we've kind of come to know and love. To me, that interior is very reminiscent of the XC40, which I really like that car as well. And anyway, it's from an exterior perspective, I think that to me is a very nice, young, maybe young family owner vehicle to own, especially from an electric perspective. A very appealing product. So, that to me is... gets the vote for my second place as the production car design of the year.
Deservedly so. I cannot really agree with argue with you on that one. I can thoroughly agree. But my number 2, and I hope you don't throw me against the wall for this one, is the Toyota Supra. And I know that there's been probably the most talked about car this year, alongside obviously the BMW Z4, because they were based on the same platform. And yes, the Supra from the interior looks like a BMW Z4 because they were developed alongside. But I love the Supras in general. I'm a big fan of Japanese racing cars, if you want to call them so, sports cars. I love the Nissan GTR. Especially on Nismo package. I mean, they're just pretty cool. Godzilla, there's nothing wrong. You can just never do anything wrong with that. The Supra for me is, I'm just extremely happy to have the Supra. It's something for me that I love that it's back. I love the way they took it. I know it's not as great as the FT1 concept that they've shown a few years ago, but it picks up exactly that point. It picks up that design language. And no, it's not perfect, but damn, it's the Supra. It's based on the FT1, and I just absolutely love it. It's a coupe as well. It's not a convertible. It's not a roadster. It's a coupe version that they've brought out first. I love it. For me, it's just really cool. Yes, it does have its flaws. Maybe it's sometimes a bit too busy. Some tiny little parts are hideous, but hey, that's what happens usually to Japanese cars anyways. but in just that kind of overall feeling. And this is something very difficult for me, is I cannot really describe exactly why I love it, but this is also for me why it's number two. It's because I just, every time I see it on the streets, like, yeah, that's great. So for me, Supra number two, and I'm very, very happy to discuss if people's just like, hey, what is wrong with you, man?
So yes, I don't particularly think the Supra is great from a design perspective. It's probably fun as hell to drive though. And especially with the short wheelbase and all the rest. But all right, everyone's entitled to their opinions. So I'm going to be
like if you want to roast me on this one, if any of our listeners want to roast me on this one, please go ahead. I'm very happy to have a very, very detailed discussion about the Supra, but please not about the Z4. The Z4 is not that great. Okay, so let's do that. But
I would agree. Arguably, they did resolve the front end a lot better on the Supra than the Z4. But anyway, okay. So moving on now.
Last but not least.
First place, production car design.
Last but not least, and production car design of 2019. And yet again, my dear friend Eric Gallina, we have come to a conclusive decision that we have a unanimous winner. What is going on with us? We have the same answer.
Same one as well.
I did pick the exact same one as you did,
wow.
As we did for the concept car design of the year. So, hey, we must be doing something right? I mean,
maybe we're spending too much time with one another is what we're doing.
That might be the case. That might be the case as well. But shed some light on our choice, and I think a lot of people will not be surprised on that one.
No, I mean, I've already gone into depth. I don't think people are going to be surprised on this if they know me. They've listened to this up until now. First of all, thank you for listening to us for the last hour and change already, I think. But yes, the number one, thanks for the gong, Martin. The number one production car design of 2019 for me goes to the Porsche Taycan. And I'm probably butchering that name. I've heard it pronounced a bunch of different ways, but I think I've spent enough time talking about its virtues and its attributes. It is a quirky little car when you think about how much technology they've put into it, which is kind of weird, that you would have to operate the air vents through the screen. Kind of weird and strange, but maybe that's just them showing that you need to do this to be avant-garde and technologically advanced. Anyway, so I'm going to let you take it from here because I've said my piece. I quite like it. I think it's good. Over to you.
I've picked it, of course, number one as well, and it's a little bit of a sign for me. I mean, and I want to kind of wrap this up with a little bit of a summary of 2019 as well. The Taycan is a very good overview on what 2019 was. I don't think we had an outstanding year, especially in terms of production cars when it came to design. But what we have realized, and you've mentioned this with the GAC guys as well, we had a quite solid year. Yeah, so if we look into the cars from production side, also from a concept side, with maybe the exception of the Tesla Cybertruck, there was very few things that were super outstanding, especially looking back into maybe the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where the Porsche Taycan then obviously excels. It's just the overall package. I think it's still recognizably a Porsche, even though it is an electric Porsche. It's also recognizably a new direction for Porsche for their electric vehicles. I do like the interior. I do think it's maybe a little bit overloaded with one screen too many, but I do like the interior. And keeping the Porsche DNA in something such as an electric vehicle, which is a massive step for that company. I mean, we should not forget about 10, 15 years ago, Porsche was almost, on the verge of going down. Then the Cayenne came over and the Panamera came and they saved that company pretty much. So the journey that they have taken, and also with the Taycan now, and how relatively quickly that was accomplished and towards the design quality, and that they have been able to keep the same quality from a design's perspective and the same uniqueness and the same Porsche DNA in an electric vehicle, you don't have to like it that it's electric and it doesn't have a sound and stuff like that. But keeping that in this super recognizable Porsche fashion. You mentioned we saw one in Munich in green, and you just see it like it's like, yeah, it's a Porsche. Like it's unmistakably Porsche. And is it ultra special? Is it something that you see like? We had the SP1 and the SP2 from Ferrari last year, which was, just absolutely pretty. And I think were the runaway winners, if I remember correctly. The Taycan is not for me the runaway winner, but it's just in this kind of pool of average to good cars, by far the best that emerged. And that was the first one that came to my mind, and that's why I stuck with it. And this, I think, is a good summary on the entire design year, 2019. It wasn't outstanding, but just a general kind of quality of a lot of things was higher. And this goes, beyond everything. This goes towards the US, goes to Europe, and also nowadays to China. And you obviously put the Polestar 2 on on your number 2 spot, which is a half European, half Chinese car, pretty much. So it's in terms of quality, in terms of the level that we're expecting nowadays, extremely positive.
Yeah, good stuff.
So nice. So congratulations to all our winners, to the Porsche team, to the Citroen team in particular, for winning their respective awards unanimously. And I also wanted to take the chance, first of all, Eric, thank you very much for always taking the time to do
my pleasure.
The podcasts. Also, a big thank you to Eddie, who's always sitting here listening to us silly people talking about things, and producing everything, cutting out any kind of issues we have with the audio line, doing all the stuff on Instagram and on Twitter, and everything that you can see online is pretty much done by him. So thank you very much to Eddie, who's sitting next to me at the moment, for doing all of that. And of course, to all of our listeners. On the Konzepthaus front, of course, as well. And a massive thank you to all the listeners. I think we will share probably something next year, but we had a massive milestone in terms of views, in terms of listens on various platforms just very recently. And this is something that, we do very much appreciate. Yes, we do spend the time and talk, but at the same time, we do appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, to comment on things, to call us and just like, hey, I agree on that one, or I didn't like what you said over here. But for all the engagement, for everything that, you have given back to us in 2019, I think on behalf of Eric, Eddie, and of course myself, a very massive thank you for all the support and, for keeping the podcast going. I mean, we're doing that for all of our listeners and for everybody out there who's interested in car design.
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to second that from Martin, because I'm always impressed by people that reach out to me and they're like, in Portland, Oregon and stuff. And, listening to us talk about cars and about the car design industry. And, big shout out to all you guys. And thanks for spending this year with us. And hopefully we'll hit the ground running with the new year and be able to present you some equally compelling episodes, maybe even some improved episodes. And anyway, in the meanwhile, I just wanted to share with everyone, extend our well wishes for a very, very nice holiday season, a Merry Christmas and other things if you don't celebrate Christmas, and indeed a very happy New Year, which we will see you in 2020.
In 2020, in January, we will be back, and we are looking forward to sharing our opinion and our knowledge with all of you in reviews of shows, special episodes, and also in the meantime, do follow us on Instagram at Konzepthaus, at Form Trends. Follow us on Spotify, on anything that you listen to, iTunes, Deezer, on your local kind of podcast app, whichever you have. And once again, thank you. And we're looking forward to sharing our thoughts and our opinions with you in 2020. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys. Thanks.